Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another video. Today I want to talk about Archaludon EX and the deck that corresponds with it. It is actually doing really good. It is the most recent champion in the Champions League Osaka. There's 5,000 players in that, and so that is a very significant achievement. And also in recent city leagues, it has also done well. I have a video talking about that one. It is one of the decks with the most number of championships. The number one is, as I've mentioned, is the Dragapult EX deck. And the second one is the Archaludon EX deck. And so I want to talk about it, discuss some counters, how people actually use it, what makes it strong, and what are the stuff that you can exploit so that you can win in depends on what deck you are using. I honestly don't like this deck because it is really not my playstyle. It is more of a tank deck. I'm more of a glass cannon type of deck user. This is why I like the Gardevoir deck so much. But before any of that, let me just remind you, if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please do. Would highly appreciate that. And if you do like this video, at the end of it, hit that like button. Alright, let's do it. The Archaludon EX deep dive. Alright, here it is, the Archaludon EX deck. This deck is coming from Limitless, the one used by the most recent champion in the Osaka League tournament with 5,000 players. So this deck is pretty legit. I don't use this deck, again, because I don't like the playstyle. However, I have went against it countless of times already. A lot of times when I'm using my main one, when I'm practicing my Gardevoir deck, and also a lot of times when I'm, just doing tests. You know me, I do a lot of non-meta decks, just checking out if they're feasible or not. And a lot of times I go against an Archaludon EX deck, and for good reason. It's one of the metas, and so yeah, I go against it a lot. And so the information that you'll get here is probably spot on, or at least very good. Now, let's just go through the deck very quickly before we give our thoughts and insights. 4 Archaludon EXs and 2 Duraludon, because of course this is your star. And so you want to put as much as you can, especially in this deck since it's just a stage 1 Pokemon. You have Origin Form Dialga V and Origin Form Dialga V Star, 2 of each. I would honestly say some people don't use it. I see some people in the city leagues who are champions don't even have this too. And so I guess this is just optional, but more on that later. So 2 of them. And then Radiant Greninja is very important here, but more on that later. Relicanth is a 1-card investment that is very good technically and situationally, so that's a good card to have here. Pheasantipity EX is just a draw engine, but I can honestly, this is something that I actually exploit. More on that later. Trainer cards, we have 4 Professor's Research because the discard your hand and draw 7 cards actually help sometimes with the Archaludon skill, actually, because you may be able to discard some of the energy cards already in your hand, plus getting 7 cards for sure, so it's a good one. Iono, he has 3 because it disrupts and also, refresh your hands if you don't like what you have and if you don't have a Professor's Research. Boss Orders 3, that's quite a lot, but I'll tell you why later. Professor Turo 2, basically, this is a tank deck, so this makes a lot of sense. Thornton, he has 1, just an insurance for late game, but this does work. Nest Ball, of course, because you can't use Puffin here, so Nest Ball is good idea. You have 4, Ultra Ball 4 as well. Good to get the Pokemon that you need, ideally the stage 1 Pokemons, and also helps you discard some energy that's already in your hand to further support Archaludon EX's skill. Night Stretcher is very important here, but more on that later. You'll see why. Earthen Vessel 3 also as a way to discard and get the energy that you need. Pokegear 2, this is a situational play. From my experience going against it, they will need a boss order or a Professor Turo. Depends on how the game is going. The A-Spec here is Scoop Up Cyclone. It works for a tanky deck, but it also has some technical uses, but more on that later. They have 2 Jamming Tower. Some people, they use a, what do you call that one? The Metal Lab, the one that reduces damage taken by metal Pokemons. But this guy in particular is using Jamming Tower. My guess is that he is really having trouble against Gardevoir decks, and for good reason. I guess you could say Gardevoir is a bad matchup for Archaludon EX decks. And then with energies, just 10. All right, now, just like in our previous videos, we are going to break down the analysis here into three, the early game, mid game, and late game. So, if you've went against this Pokemon in the past, you'll probably notice that it doesn't want to attack in the early parts of the game. It will do an attack in the turn 3 or maybe 4. Oh, let me retract that. It will attack something like a Hammer-In in the beginning, but the Metal Defender attack will not come until the 3rd or 4th turn. What it wants to do in the beginning is just to draw as much cards as possible and get as much of the Nest Balls and Duraludon so that they can set up their Duraludons. It has pretty high HP, so it's kind of safe in some way. Also a one-prizer, so it will not evolve into Archaludon EX until it's necessary for them, when it has enough energy in the discard pile. And also, another thing that they want to do is discard as much energy, metal energy, as much as they can. And so this is why Radiant Greninja is very important to them, because it hits two birds in one stone. It draws for you and also discard energy cards to help Archaludon's ability later on. So in the early game, the usual setup is 1 Radiant Greninja, 3 Duraludons, or 4 if they are able to get it. Relicanth will not be there until later. Pheasantipity will not be there until someone is KO'd. Technically, they should not put Dialga V. I, however, have seen some people put Dialga V in, someone who is using this deck. But I think that's a mistake, because what happens most of the time is, this is what I exploit. It has 2 retreat costs, so that's kind of high. And if you evolve it into a Dialga V-Star, it will turn into 3. And it does need 5 energies in order to use a Star Chronos. And probably around 5 energies as well in order to have as much damage as the Metal Defender, which only needs 3. And so in the early parts of the game, if you're smart user of Archaludon, you shouldn't be putting Dialga V or V-Star yet. Because if you're going against smart players, they will definitely take advantage of that. So if you're going against this deck, depending on what deck you are using, if you're using some deck that can do heavy damage early on, then what you want to do is definitely kill a 2-prizer right away. Either a Dialga V or V-Star, not Duraludon. Pheasantipity if you can. I would hold off in attacking and killing a 1-prizer, because that gives you an advantage in prizes, and thus he will be able to use a counter catcher. And if you kill a 1-prizer, that kind of ruins you mathematically, because what you want to do is, at least against this deck, is kill 3 2-prizers and then you're done. But if you kill a 1-prizer, what will happen is either you will need to kill 3 2-prizers or 2 2-prizers and 1 1-prizer. So in the end, that's still 3 turns. And so your attack there, even though it's kind of tempting to do, it will put you in a disadvantage all throughout the game, in my opinion. What you can do ideally is just use a attack that will do some damage but not kill anyone. That will put the Archaludon user in kind of a bind. Does he use a Professor Turo on that damaged Pokemon already, or not yet, to hold it off? But then if they don't, you will have the advantage later on to just attack it or spread damage it. Depends on what deck you are using again. So that's definitely beneficial if you are going against, or if you are using a Dragapult deck, right? But yeah, so that's what I would do in the early parts of the game. Just do some damage on a 1-prizer. But again, if you can do a 1-hit KO already on a 2-prizer, then go ahead and do it. Now, when you get to the mid-game, this is where Archaludon decks really shines. It gets some traction. So it will then start evolving the Archaludon to use the Assembly Alloy. So if you haven't heard of this skill yet, then I'll read it to you. So when you play this Pokemon to evolve a Duraludon, basically you can get 2 basic energies, metal energies, from your discard pile and attach it to a metal Pokemon in any way you like, right? So you could put it on another Archaludon, or you can put it on a Dialga V, right? Or another Duraludon. But yeah, so this is what makes it really good in terms of acceleration. So think of it like a Charizard EX, but instead of Infernal Rain, where it lets you search from the deck, with Archaludon, it lets you search from the discard pile and then attach it. And also, this is why you want a lot of Duraludon in your bench, so that you have the potential of, in any case, evolve maybe 3 Duraludons into Archaludon, and then put all of the energies, like that's 6 energies in total, into Dialga V-Star, and then use Star Chronos, which gives you another turn, and then use Metal Blast on the next turn after you use Star Chronos. But this is, again, mostly used in the end game, but just to say that this is the potential that it can do. And that is also the reason why you need a lot of Metal Energy in your discard pile. But yeah, so the usual scenario is you have a Duraludon on your active spot, or the Archaludon user in the active spot, and then it will evolve into Archaludon EX, and then it will put 2 energy into Archaludon EX, and then usually what will happen is they have 1 energy already, metal energy, and then evolve and attach. That's what they can do, and then use a metal defender. If it has a disadvantage in prizes, then it will use a counter catcher to lure someone that it can kill. Usually, since a lot of decks are using Fezandipiti EX, they will go ahead and lure Fezandipiti EX in front, or maybe a Teal Mask Ogrepon if that's the deck that uses it, or a whatever, a Rotom V or a Luminion V. So whatever it is that it can kill with its Metal Defender attack, it will try to lure it there. If you've also killed it during the your turn, it will then put a Fezandipiti in, if it hasn't yet, and then get some free draws. Also, I mentioned earlier that in the early parts of the game, don't KO a Duraludon. And also, to add to that, if he already has an Archaludon, don't attack it and give it a lot of damage and yet not KO it. So like if you give it 280 damage, or a 210 damage, Relicanth will be there in the mid part of the game, and then it can use a Raging Hammer, which is much more devastating, much higher damage output than just a Metal Defender. And so if I'm going against a Archaludon EX deck, my priority is always to kill either a Fezandipiti EX or a Dialga V. Dialga V-Star is already very high in HP, so if you can, then yeah, but it kind of is in the same boat as Archaludon EX. So if you're not able to KO it, might as well not damage it, because Professor Turo will come, or the Scoop Up Cyclone will come, and then that will also help him do some more evolution. So because if he uses Scoop Up Cyclone, then he will have an Archaludon in his hand in order to evolve another Duraludon that is set up in play. Or if he did not do that, he can probably use a Raging Hammer with a Relicanth in play. So this is why I mentioned Fezandipiti is kind of like exploited a lot in this deck, because it is a reachable HP 2-prizer. And so if you are an Archaludon user, maybe you can consider this one. But I guess, sometimes the benefits outweighs the downside. But yeah, so this is what I exploit. If you're an Archaludon user, this is something that you can consider. If you are a Dragapult EX or a Charizard EX deck user, you will have a really hard time here in the mid game, because you won't be able to KO it yet, right? Usually in the mid game, the damage that you can do, at least for Charizard, won't be enough to kill Archaludon yet. So expect Professor Turo scenario to come, or a Scoop Up Cyclone to help him just survive more hits from you, basically make you waste some turns. Granted, he can kill you as well in one turn, because the 220 damage is short of 320 or 330. However, you using Professor Turo is much more costlier than him just using a Professor Turo and then evolving right away, sometimes in the same turn, since he does have a lot of Duraludon already in place in the beginning. But yeah, just to recap, the mid game would basically be a rinse and repeat of evolving Duraludon into Archaludon EX using Assemble Alloy. And if he gets some damage, use either a Professor Turo or a Scoop Up Cyclone. And then if you ever do some KO, he will get some Night Stretcher in order to get a Duraludon in the discard pile and then evolve another Duraludon. So for sure, in every turn, he will be able to use a Assemble Alloy and use a Metal Defender as well. Now, when it comes to the late game, this is where you can possibly tip the scales. Again, this depends on what deck you are using, but a lot of the meta decks are kind of like an avalanche with no way to stop it towards the end. And with Archaludon EX having only 220 as its max damage potential. So just an example, if you are a Charizard EX user, once Archaludon EX has 2 prizes remaining, you can put in a fresh Charizard EX and knock out an Archaludon EX in one turn, and then in the next turn, even if he uses an Archaludon EX again to attack with a Metal Defender, you will still survive and attack it again with a Burning Darkness, and again knock out another Archaludon EX. That is a 4 prizes compared to 0 prizes turnaround. So yeah, this is where, again, that's why I said you can possibly tip the scales in the late game. But that's also where the Dialga V-Star will most likely come into play. Either to use Star Chronos and have another turn to attack you with a Metal Blast, to do basically upwards of 330 damage and get those last 2 prizes that it needs to get. Or if it is going against someone that is a non-meta user or someone with a non-high HP Pokemon, something like, for example, they are going against a Gardevoir, something like my deck, then I will be able to do one hit on possibly, let's say, a Luminion V or a 1 prizer, and then next turn use a Metal Blast that could do upwards of 310 damage to kill something like a Gardevoir EX. So that's a 3 prize turnaround. That being said, I'll tell you the scenario that you'll be looking at, the ones that it needs in order to use a Star Chronos in one turn. So basically, what it needs is 2 Duraludons in play, and then 4 Metal Energy in the discard pile, and then at least 1 Dialga V in the bench as well. So what it will do is, in his turn, he will use 2 Archaludons to evolve Duraludon, which gives it 4 energy from Assembly Alloy, and attach it to Dialga V-Star, so that's 4 energies. And then if it has 1 energy in his hand, usually pretty easy to do, then it will be able to have 5 energies and use Star Chronos. So if you saw that that's the scenario, he has 2 Duraludons, 1 Dialga V on the bench. What you want to do is to kill a Dialga V so that he'll need another turn to set up a Dialga V-Star. Or if he has 2 Dialga Vs, then and then only 2 Duraludons, you can probably take a risk and kill 1 Duraludon. That way he will only get 2 energies to give Dialga V-Star. Alright, that saves you at least 1 more turn. You can play it by ear, and depends on the scenario. You can probably go with Pheasantipity as well, right? You can prevent him from using Flip the Script in the next turn and also give you 2 prizes. But in a way, that's also not putting energy in the discard pile. So like, for example, if the Archaludon has 3 energies, it will stay that way. It will not go to the discard pile and transfer it to Dialga V-Star. So that's what you don't want to happen. And also, if you put a Archaludon EX on the discard pile, then he can just use a Night Stretcher to get it and evolve a Duraludon. So that's one more step in his favor, and so yeah, I would say Pheasant Deputy is a better option than killing Archaludon EX. And there you go. That is the strategy and counters broken down in 3 different scenarios: the early, mid, and late game. Now that you know all that, you probably have a better chance of winning against this deck compared to before, when you don't know anything about it, or maybe you just don't have a lot of experience going against it. It's a pretty strong deck, obviously, because it did garner some championships this year and last year, but it's not impossible to beat, can be exploited, has a straightforward, not overly technical kind of gameplay, and yeah. That's it for now. I hope you learned from that. Thank you for watching. I will see you on the next one.